In this video, I'm going to kind of go over looking at Jesus as an exorcist and about demons and exorcisms that are kind of occurring at the time that Jesus' ministry was going on, kind of in the part of the greater Greco-Roman world. So, first of all, part of Jesus' announcement that God's kingdom was coming into the world involved demonstrating that this meant expelling evil spirits. What's the pneumoponeron, the Greek term. So evil spirits and demons. So the Greek word daimonion. And these beings plague human lives. So what we find when we see in the Gospels is Jesus casting out an impure spirit or an evil spirit. And we also find him casting out demons. And so what we're entering into is this world that would have been perceived by Jews and many other groups of people as a world that is filled with different kind of what I would call celestial beings. So this is what Jesus is going to be exorcising or casting out of people. So a question sometimes that is raised is the term evil spirit and the term demon basically synonyms? Well, the textbook that we use for this class, the Galilean Wonder Worker, Wallis, says yes, that they are. And it's true that it may be that some gospel authors, such as Mark, might see them as synonyms because he talks about the Gerasene demoniac having an evil spirit. But I'm not going to say that this is necessarily true for Luke's gospel, because in Luke's gospel, we find that Luke takes over Mark's accounts, and where Mark will have evil spirits, for there's a man in a synagogue in Nazareth that has an evil spirit, and there's this man in the Gerasene area near the Decapolis, or on the other side of the Sea of Galilee that Jesus goes to, who is living in the tombs and who is very strong and powerful. He has an evil spirit. But in Luke's gospel, both men, that evil spirit is called a demon. Now, someone might say, well, this is proof that Luke sees demons and evil spirits as synonyms. Or it may be that what Luke is doing is he's wanting to demonstrate something, which I'll explain later on, about Jesus' power over the demons and not just over evil spirits. So what did Jews think demons were? Well, demons represent celestial beings, such as gods. In fact, in Greek literature, the daimonions could be thought of as a god, or they can be thought of as some type of being who can give inspiration, or who can be called upon to help with assistance. So amongst the Greeks, it's not necessarily that the daimonions are evil. But for Jews, the daimonions are associated with idolatry, and they are associated with covenantal unfaithfulness. And so these demons are not good figures, whereas amongst Greeks, the daimonions could be a good or is not necessarily bad. But for Jewish literature, the daimonions are bad, and it's probably because of their association with idolatry. And one of the things you may want to read is in Deuteronomy 31:17. So we'll just pause here for a second to think about Deuteronomy 31:17. That passage, Deuteronomy 31:17, which I will read here from the NRSV version, 31 and verse 17. I'll start off with verse 16. The Lord, or Yahweh, said to Moses, "Soon you will lie down with your ancestors. Then this people will begin to prostitute themselves to the foreign gods in their midst, the gods of the land into which they are going. They will forsake me, breaking my covenant that I have made with them. My anger will be kindled against them in that day. I will forsake them and hide my face from them. They will become easy prey, and many terrible troubles will come upon them. In that day they will say, have these troubles come upon us because our God is not in our midst." So the what's translated here is gods in the NRSV is in the Greek translation of the Old Testament is seen as the daimonions. So they're going after the daimonions. They're going, Israel will become unfaithful because they will pursue the daimonions. They will pursue these gods. They will pursue these beings and seek to get these beings on their side. So what happens, though, is there's a development of Jewish demonology that arises after Babylonian captivity. And part of it is sparked or encouraged by the way in which some Jews would read stories or accounts like the one in Genesis 6, where there are these sons of God, which is language for celestial beings. We're not going to call them angels, but there's some kind of celestial beings. And some traditions developed, which we can find, and particularly like in the book of First Enoch, where these celestial beings end up being, since they disobeyed God, they cohabitated with the daughters of men. And we see these beings then responsible for evil that occurs in the world. And so what may have been thought of at one stage, maybe in the 3rd century BC, the 4th century, 3rd or 4th century, may have been demons or gods, they're going to become a more negative creatures. So what did the Greeks think of demons? Well, I've been saying that the demon is merely a deity, or they can be a celestial mediator. We have some illustrations of this when you look at Wallis's work on Jesus as the Exodus. And in particular, I'll address your attention to his footnote 13, in which he gives some illustrations about this. Now he will say, this is on page 99, where he will talk about demons tended not to be cast in pejorative life, but denoted deities or divine mediators. In footnote 13, he is going to quote from a source called Pindor, in which it says, their Olympic victories to date have, it seems, already been reported, and those to come I would declare clearly when they occur. At this point, I am hopeful, but with the god, the daimon, is the outcome. But if their family fortune should continue, we will leave it to Zeus and Elias to accomplish. So this is an illustration where the god is a mediator who could be helpful. We can also see in Plato's Symposium. This is on page 100, where that's provided to you by Wallis. And so in this section, we have this kind of dialogue. See, you see, she said, you are a person who does not consider love to be a god. What then, I ask, can love be? A mortal? Anything but that. Well, what? As I previously suggested, between a mortal and an immortal. And what is that, Diotima? A great spirit, so a daimon megos. Socrates, for the whole of the spiritual is between divine and mortal. That is, the daimonion metaxu esti, theote kai theotu. So between the spiritual, between the divine and the mortal. Possessing what power, I asked. Interpreting and transporting human things to the gods and divine things to men. Entries and sacrifices from below, and ordinances and requels from above, being midway between it, makes each to supplement the other, so that the whole is combined in one. Through it are conveyed all divinations and priestcraft concerning sacrifice and rituals and incantations and all soothsayings and sorcery. God with man does not mingle, but the spiritual is the means of all society and converse of men with gods and the gods with men, whether waking or asleep. Whosoever has skill in these affairs is a spiritual man. Ta toiata sophos daimonios aner, the spiritual man, the daimonios aner. To have it in any of the matters, as is common arts and crafts, is for the mechanical. Many and multifarious are these spirits, the hoi daimonios poloi, these spirits, and one of them is love. So, love can be thought of as a daimonion, this spirit or this being that intercedes between men and God. Now, Jewish demonology had to converse with Hellenistic mythology, the way in which Greeks thought about the world, which they might have thought about the gods. And so, as Jews are thinking about the daimonions or about these spirits, they think about their biblical texts and about what they understand from biblical texts about God and the work of the world, and that there are gods and that there are these evil spirits. So they can incorporate some of what Hellenistic or Greek mythology teaches, but there's also some reaction to it. Now, so all this is helpful for when we begin to look at Jesus' exorcisms. Whether a person had an evil spirit or an unclean spirit or a demon, being under the influence of such spirits was a form of a bodily invasion. So the person has this, something has come into this person and is affecting this person bodily. Interestingly, forgiveness of sins is not a prerequisite in Jesus' ministry for a person to be exorcised of these spirits. Jesus does not say to the person with an unclean spirit or to the person with an evil spirit or the person with a demon, he doesn't say your sins are forgiven and then exorcises the person, as he does when he frequently, though not always, frequently heals a person of a disease. He might say your sins are forgiven and then heal them. He doesn't do any of that when he's dealing with exorcisms. So getting an unclean spirit or getting an evil spirit or getting a demon is not necessarily connected to having sinned. So the question comes, well, how does one end up getting it? Now, Mark 5, verses 1 through 20 is our longest account of Jesus' exorcisms. You may want to take a good, careful look at that account. So maybe something significant, the fact that the spirit is called legion, because the word legion is the name for a Roman military unit. And the fact that this spirit is called legion, and that when Jesus casts out legion, legion is going to go into pigs. And it just so happens that the military legion that was based in Syria had as its emblem, as its mascot, a boar. So you're kind of wondering, is something being told to us about Jesus' power over legion, maybe as a symbol for Roman military might, as he casts legion out into pigs, who then end up destroying themselves. So Jesus' power. So why does Jesus want Herod Antipas to know that he is casting out demons, which is, we're told, in Luke 13:31-33? One that needs to remember about Herod Antipas's position. Herod has sought to make Galilee very prosperous. And in order to make Galilee prosperous, he has had to try to bring in outside money, investors, people who could invest in developing the land, farming the land, building things, are going to primarily be non-Jews. He could probably entice certain wealthy Jews to help in his improvement of Galilee, but he's going to need investors. He's going to need people who want to take over land that has gone and been either confiscated by Herod, or they have fall into bankruptcy, or they can't pay their loans, and that land has been confiscated. And in order to produce enough produce, sometimes lands need to be bigger, and then you hire the Jews who used to work the land to now work the land for the Gentile landowner. Well, in order to get Gentile landowners to come to Galilee, Herod and his father had to build cities in order to attract them, because investors are not going to want to live in small Jewish villages. They want to live in places that they would see as sophisticated or as urban. And so cities were built by Herod the Great and Herod Antipas. So like there was Sepphoris, not far from where Jesus lived, of Nazareth. You have Tiberias that was created. Of course, Caesarea Maritima on the coast. Port Herod the Great built. So here are efforts that are being made to attract Gentiles to come and live in these cities while they might own then property out in Galilee. Well, if a Gentile is going to come into the area, the Gentiles are going to be bringing their own gods. And so you're going to have the gods of the Greeks or the gods of the Gentiles coming into the Holy Land or into Galilee. And so if Jesus can cast out the demons or can cast out the evil spirits, particularly in Luke's gospel, casting out demons is to show Jesus' power over those spirits that are oftentimes associated with pagan rituals, pagan idolatry. So whereas it was thought that these gods could help Gentiles and to become prosperous, Jesus has power over them. He can cast them out, almost like a symbol of wanting to cast out the idolatry that has come into Galilee because of people like Herod Antipas. So how have scholars tried to explain Jesus' exorcism? So here one might want to take a look at Wallis's work and page 110. And so on page 110, he lists 4 particular approaches to these. So some scholars think of what Jesus was encountering. Number 1 was the internalization of social tensions or conflict. In other words, what people are having, what is being called demons, are basically their reaction to the sufferings, the effects of economic, military, political upheaval, involuntarily internalize the unrest. In other words, they don't like what is happening. They have anxiety about what is happening. This anxiety demonstrates itself in behavior that it would be seen as erratic or troublesome. So that's one. So in other words, for scholars who don't believe in the existence of demons or evil spirits, what Jesus is seeing is these people who are troubled because of what they're having to live under. 2 is an escape from or protest against oppression, an intentional strategy often ritually induced by which those experiencing external oppression place themselves beyond the reach of their oppressors. So in other words, the oppressors can oppress people who can are rational, that they can deal with, that they can get to respond to their pressure. But if a person is irrational, and that coming from a strategy, that some kind of ritual that they may go through in order to become irrational, it's their way of escaping that external oppression. So that's the second one. A third one is a strategy by which oppressors stigmatize, disempower, or neutralize the oppressed, silencing their legitimate protest by undermining their status and significance. So Jesus is dealing with people who feel they have been undermined, who feel like they have been stigmatized and disempowered. And so what he's releasing them from, what he's casting out, is this sense of being stigmatized or disempowered. And Wallis offers a fourth, a culturally conditioned role with a dramatic performance of transformation through which demonic oppressive capacities within a community are identified and expunged. So for Wallis, here is a demonic oppressive capacities within a community. So a community can affect a person, and thinking of this demonically or oppressively. And Jesus is expunging, Jesus is casting out, as it were, what it is a community might do to a person. And this has been conditioned by them. And so this is a very dramatic performance to transform that person in their relationship to the community. So you might want to take a look at these different explanations that are sometimes offered for what Jesus' exorcism is doing, if one is trying to think that, well, there's no such things as real demons or evil spirits, so what is it that he's actually dealing with? So Jesus' exorcism not only brings about bodily healing, but it also participates in Yahweh's subjugation of destructive forces. So much like Jesus calming the sea is a destructive force, well, the presence of demons, the presence of evil spirits, unclean spirits, these are destructive within human life and with the community's life. And so since God's kingdom is coming through the ministry of Jesus, he's demonstrating God's power over these destructive forces. So Jesus' stilling of the storm might also be seen as a type of exorcism, since the sea, very oftentimes for some Jews, were seen as a place of evil spirits. Evil spirits can live in the sea, although there's also Jewish thinking about evil spirits living out in the deserts. And so calming the sea can be a way of showing power over the spirits in the sea. All right, so we will leave that as a kind of a quick overview of some aspects of Jesus's exorcism.